Jasmine arrived before dawn, pushing open the heavy glass door of the Magnolia Diner. The small bell above the door rang softly, announcing her presence to the sleeping morning. She slipped into her denim apron and tied it around her waist, nodding. It just right. The kitchen lights glowed warmly behind her. She took a steady breath and stepped inside, ready for another long shift. She carried a stack of clean plates to the counter and set them down with a gentle clink. Her shoes made quiet taps on the worn linoleum floor as she walked toward the coffee station. Steam hissed from the espresso machine when she flipped it on. The rich smell of coffee filled her lungs and eased the last bits of sleep from her mind. Jasmine's dark eyes shone bright in the soft light, framed by her neat braid. As she poured the first cup, she glanced into the little mirror that hung by the cash register. There, in the pale reflection, was the jagged scar across her right cheek. It began just below her eye and curved down toward her jaw. Sometimes it felt like a map of a moment she wished she could forget. Other times it felt like proof of her own courage. She pressed her finger lightly against the cool glass as if to remind herself that she was still whole. The diner was empty save for its long vinyl booths and the faded jukebox in the corner. Jasmine wiped down the counter, moving and practiced rhythms. The morning sun seeped through the dusty windows, painting stripes of gold on the floor. She set out sugar packets, salt shakers, and small vases with fake daisies. Everything had its place, and Jasmine took quiet pride in the order she created. By 6:30, the first customers arrived. A man in a dark suit sat at the far booth and spread out the morning paper. A young couple chatted softly at a table near the window. Each of them greeted Jasmine with a polite nod or a quick good morning. They rarely stared at her scar. Most people gave it a quick glance, then looked away. She preferred it that way. Her co-worker, Shelley, emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of bacon and eggs. "Morning, Jazz," she said, her voice warm and friendly. "Ready for another rush?" Jasmine smiled and shook her head. "I think the rush will wait until the sun is higher," she replied. Shelley leaned on the counter and studied Jasmine's face for a moment. Then she set the tray down and picked up a half-full coffee pot. "You okay?" Shelley asked softly. Jasmine nodded. "Just thinking." Shelley patted her arm and headed off. As Jasmine moved from table to table, she took orders and refilled cups. She worked without pause, careful not to let her thoughts wander too far. Customers chatted about local news, the weather, and sports. The diner stayed calm, a steady hum of soft voices and clinking dishes. Jasmine smiled as she took an order from Mr. Henderson, the retired schoolteacher who always asked for extra toast. She poured his coffee and set the toast on his plate. He winked at her as she walked away. In quieter moments, Jasmine would feel a prick of memory. She remembered the accident that left the scar, the screech of tires on wet pavement, the sudden impact that threw her through the windshield, the world spinning in gray flashes. She could still hear the distant yells of strangers rushing toward her. But those memories stayed buried beneath layers of routine and strength. She did not let herself linger there for long. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She slid it out and saw a text from her mother. "How are you doing today?" Jasmine fingered the screen and typed back, "Okay, busy." Then she returned the phone to her pocket. Her mother worried a lot. She did not want to add to her worry. Instead, Jasmine focused on the next task, clearing off a table of empty plates. By 8 o'clock, the sun had climbed higher, and more customers arrived. A group of teenagers came in, laughing and talking loudly. One of them noticed Jasmine's scar and snickered to his friends before ordering. Jasmine felt a familiar ache in her chest, but kept her face calm. She wrote down their order and walked away. She told herself to hold on until the end of the shift. Midway through her shift, Jasmine took a moment behind the counter. She closed her eyes and leaned her head against the cool tile wall. She let her breath slow. She reminded herself that every day she faced strangers, and most would judge her by her scar. But she would never let that judgment break her. She squared her shoulders and opened her eyes. The next customer needed her attention. Soon, it was late morning. The diner's bell jingled and more people entered. A mother with a young boy pointed at the pie display, her eyes kind. Jasmine served them with her usual warmth. She watched the boy's face light up as he chose a slice of cherry pie. For a moment, she forgot about her scar. She saw herself in that boy's wonder. When the lunch crowd approached, Jasmine felt the shift change. Outside, she could see cars lining up to park. She braced herself and picked up her pad. She walked toward the door, where the smell of fresh air mixed with the diner's warmth. She stepped outside for a brief moment to fill her lungs with the cool wind. She felt the scar on her cheek beneath her palm, a faint reminder of survival. Jasmine straightened and walked back inside. She crossed the threshold and faced the cafe's bright lights and busy tables. She was ready for what came next. She had crafted a shield of quiet confidence, and her scar was only one part of her story. She took the next order. She reminded herself that she belonged here. She was the heart of this little diner. She would carry her strength with every step, even if no one else saw it. And so she began the next round of orders, each plate and cup a small victory. Her scar was there, but it did not define her. Jasmine moved through her morning shift with calm resolve, preparing for whatever surprises the day might bring. The bell over the door rang again, and a group of 3 regulars walked in. They always came together around mid-morning, chatting in low voices as they scanned the room. One of them, Mr. Parker, wore a newsboy cap and had a quick smile. Another, Mrs. Dunlop, carried a woven purse and tapped her fingers on the counter. The third, a younger man they called Eddie, trailed behind, nodding to Jasmine as she wiped down a nearby table. Jasmine met Mrs. Dunlop's eyes and offered her usual warm greeting. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm. The 3 took seats at the counter, sliding onto the stools that creaked under their weight. Jasmine placed menus in front of them before turning to grab a pot of coffee. As Jasmine poured their coffee, she moved carefully, balancing the pot and the cups. Her mind floated briefly to other mornings like this, when the group's banter felt light and friendly, but today was different. Mrs. Dunlop tapped her fingernail on the counter. "Jazzy," she said, using Jasmine's nickname. "Did you get that new scar fixed up yet?" Jasmine's hand stilled for a moment. She placed the coffee pot down and kept her face composed. "It's the same," she said softly, her eyes focused on the dark coffee swirling in the cup. "It reminds me every day of what I have passed." Mr. Parker snorted. "Passed? More like you've got a reminder of your ugly mug." He winked at the others. Eddie laughed, louder than needed. Jasmine felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She told herself to breathe. Without looking up, Jasmine reached for a tray of bacon and eggs. She set it before Mrs. Dunlop. "Your usual," she said. Mrs. Dunlop ignored the food and poked at Jasmine's scar with the tip of her finger. "Why don't you cover it up with makeup? Or maybe a nice scarf?" Jasmine forced a small smile. "I like it as it is." She turned away and started clearing empty dishes from the next table. Her heart pounded, but she kept her back straight. She told herself this moment was temporary. The younger couple at the corner table watched in silence. They exchanged uneasy looks. Jasmine knew they felt sorry for her, but she could not let them see her pain. She wiped the counter behind the 3 regulars, her motion deliberate, but "Slow here, Jas," said Mrs. Dunlop, shoving a napkin toward her. "Use this. Maybe it'll hide that mess for a minute." Jasmine took the napkin and folded it around her finger without glancing at the other woman. She nodded and walked toward the sink. At the sink, Jasmine let the water run over her hand as she hid the napkin. She gazed at her reflection in the stainless steel backsplash, familiar face marked by a thin, pale line. She remembered the accident, the hospital, and the long nights when she felt small and alone. Oh, those nights were over, she reminded herself. She was strong now. A soft voice came from behind her. "Hey, are you okay?" It was Shelley. Jasmine turned and nodded. "I'm fine," she said. Shelley placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Ignore them." Jasmine looked away. She did not want pity, only respect. Back at the counter, Jasmine refilled sugar and creamer. Mr. Parker tapped his fingers and cleared his throat. "Come on, sweetheart," he said. "What happened to you?" "Spill the tea." Mrs. Dunlop leaned in, her voice low and hungry. Did you get into a fight? Or maybe a car crash? Jasmine paused, spoon in hand. She thought about inventing a story, but she refused to share those private memories with people who saw her scar as a joke. She relaxed her shoulders and set the spoon down. It was a car accident, she said simply. It took me a long time to heal. Eddie laughed again. Healing from an accident. It looked like you lost. Every fight you ever had. His laughter turned into a cough when he noticed Jasmine's steady stare. She said nothing. Her silence felt louder than any words. A hush fell over the counter. The couple in the corner shifted, and even Mr. Henderson at the booth looked up. From his toast, the diner's atmosphere changed. People sensed the tension. Jasmine cleared the rest of their plates without a word and carried the tray to the kitchen door. In the kitchen, she set the tray down and leaned against the counter. Shelley followed her. "Let's get you some water," Shelley whispered, grabbing 2 glasses. They walked back out, Shelley at Jasmine's side. Jasmine held her head high as she returned. She set the water glasses before the 3. Mrs. Dunlop glared. "You don't need our pity water," she said. Jasmine tapped the glass gently. "I need nothing from you," she replied softly. As she turned to leave, Mrs. Dunlop called out, "You're too sensitive." Jasmine froze. Then she walked away, ignoring the words. She served other tables, offering smiles that felt as real as they were brave. Across the room, the young couple whispered to each other. The boy gave Jasmine a small nod of support when she passed. The girl mouthed, "I'm sorry." Jasmine managed a quick, grateful glance. The lunch crowd grew louder, and Jasmine moved among them, writing orders, balancing plates, and pouring drinks. She focused on the work, on the rhythm of her steps, on the hiss of the coffee machine. Each task reminded her that she belonged here, that her scar was part of her, but not all of her. Back at the counter, Mr. Parker and his friend sat in awkward silence. Shelley stood near them, arms crossed. Jasmine finished with the last table and returned to the counter. She placed a fresh pot of coffee before the 3 regulars. "Refill?" she asked. Mr. Parker nodded slowly. He lifted his cup. Jasmine knew he wanted an apology. She waited as he drank. Then he set the cup down hard. "Thanks," he muttered. "And sorry if I was out of line." Mrs. Dunlop looked down at her lap. I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. Jasmine nodded and smiled. It was a good start. Later, when the regulars left, Jasmine wiped the counter. She thought about the morning's words. They had cut deep, but she had survived them. She felt a small fire in her chest. It was not anger, but a fierce promise. She would never let cruel words change who she was. As she cleared the last dishes, Jasmine said a silent thank you to herself. She had faced mockery and kept her dignity. She believed that one day people would see her scar not as a flaw, but as a mark of strength. The door jingled again, and Jasmine turned, ready for the next customer. She straightened her apron and took a breath. Her scar shone in the light, a pale line on proud skin. She stepped forward with quiet courage, knowing she was more than the hardest words anyone could speak. The bell above the diner door jingled, and Jasmine looked up to see a tall man step inside. He wore a faded green t-shirt that read USMC in bold letters and jeans rolled at the cuffs. A well-worn baseball cap sat low on his head, and his shoulders carried a quiet strength. He paused near the entrance. Scanning the room as if searching for someone, Jasmine wiped her hands on her apron and moved toward him. As she approached, she noticed the man's steady gaze. His eyes were steel gray, and they seemed to hold both kindness and an unspoken story of hardship. He stood at the counter and nodded to Jasmine. "Coffee, please." "Lack," he said in a calm voice that reminded her of distant thunder. Jasmine poured the coffee, set the cup on the counter, and met his eyes. He leaned forward, his face coming into clearer view. Jasmine felt her heart skip a beat. She recognized the scar that ran down his forearm, the way his left eye had a tiny flicker when he blinked. Her mind raced back to the desert patrols, the sand in her hair, the moment she thought she might never see home again. The Marine's lips curved into a small, gentle smile. Jazzy asked, as if speaking her name would make the world settle into place. Hovering above the tray of coffee, every memory she had worked so hard to keep at bay rushed back. The day she first met Luis Moreno at Camp Echo, his easy laughter beside the Humvee, and the night she patched him up after a roadside blast. She had not expected him to walk through the diner door in this small town. Her breath caught. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Luis?" He straightened, eyes shining with recognition and relief. "Jasmine Walker," he said, pronouncing her full name with a tenderness that warmed her chest. "I never thought I'd see you here." She placed the coffee on the counter with a soft clink and touched his arm. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips. "I didn't think I'd be in this town anymore," she said, her voice steady now. But her eyes glistened with unshed tears. Luis straightened his cap and looked around. "I heard you moved here after everything." He paused, as if weighing each word. "I came to see you." Jasmine's heart swelled. She swallowed hard and nodded. "I'm glad you did." They stood in silence for a moment, the diner's morning bustle fading into background noise. Other customers turned in their booths, whispering and glancing at the pair. Jasmine felt a surge of warmth spread through her body, chasing away the memory of cruel laughter from earlier. Here was someone who understood the meaning behind her scar, a fellow soldier who knew what it took to survive. Luis motioned to a booth by the window where the morning light poured in golden beams. Jasmine led the way, and he sat down. She joined him across from him and placed 2 coffees on the table. For a moment, they just looked at each other, sharing a silent bond. "Every scar has a story," Luis said after a sip of his coffee. His voice was gentle but firm. "Yours saved my life." Jasmine's fingers tightened around her mug. She remembered the ambush on Patrol 4. A single explosion had thrown her off balance, and shrapnel cut her cheek as she fell. She had crawled to Luis, who lay crumpled near the road's edge. The field medic was 10 minutes away, and those minutes felt like hours. Jasmine used her uniform bandage to stem his bleeding until help arrived. She had saved him. Later, she woke in the hospital. With a scar that told the world she had paid a price, Luis leaned forward. "I never thanked you properly." His steel-gray eyes shone bright with gratitude. "You kept me alive that day. I wouldn't be here without you." Jasmine swallowed. Memories flooded back. The ambulance ride, the medic's eyes, and Luce's labored breathing as he murmured her name. She had thought of him often, in the months after she left the service. When she saw him walk into the diner, it felt like fate had given her a second chance to talk about what happened. "It was my job," she said quietly. "I did what any of us would have done." Luis shook his head. "No, you went beyond. You risked your own life." He paused and looked at her scar. "This scar represents more than a wound. It shows your courage." Jasmine felt tears spill down her cheeks. She brushed them away quickly. "I don't always feel courageous," she admitted. "Some days I feel like that scar marks me as broken." Luis reached across the table and took her hand. His grip was firm, steadying her. "You're not broken," he said. "You're whole and strong and alive." That scar, he traced a finger along her cheek gently. "It's proof." A small crowd had gathered at the counter, watching the reunion unfold.
Aspen
Felt self-conscious but also strangely empowered. The same faces that once saw a scar and made jokes now saw an honored Marine greeting her with respect. Their whispers softened into nods of approval and curious smiles. Luis stood and held out his hand. "Let me take you out to lunch," he offered. "I want to catch up properly." Jasmine looked around at the diner, then back at him. She smiled. "I'd like that." He helped her to her feet, and they walked to the counter. Jasmine picked up her apron. Shelley stepped forward with a proud grin. "Well, look at you two," she said softly. "Good to see you reunited." Mr. Henderson, who sat nearby, gave Jasmine a thumbs up. "About time someone recognized a hero," he said with a wink. Other customers nodded their agreement. The diner's energy shifted from tension to celebration. Luis paid for his coffee and Jasmine's meal. He turned to her with a grin. "Come on. Let's get you out of this uniform. And me out of my capand." Find a place to talk." Jasmine laughed, the sound ringing clear and bright. As she followed Luis out the door, she felt a lightness she had not known in years. The morning sun felt warmer, and the scar on her cheek no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a story of survival, friendship, and unexpected reunions. Outside, Luis wrapped an arm around Jasmine's shoulders. She leaned into him, glad for the support. The town seemed different now, kinder, more caring. The road ahead felt brighter, too. Jasmine knew that whatever came next, she would face it with courage, and with a friend who understood her battle scars. They walked along the sunlit sidewalk, leaving the diner's bell jingling behind them. Luis guided Jasmine toward a small cafe across the street. Its windows were wide, and the scent of fresh bread floated through the open door. Jasmine felt a buzz of excitement mixed with a gentle calm. She had not expected this day to change so much. Inside the cafe, they found a quiet table near the back. Luis pulled out a chair for Jasmine and sat opposite her. "This place is cozy," he said, glancing around at the hanging plants and brightly painted walls. A young barista waved at them, and Luis nodded. Jasmine smiled at the friendly greeting. They ordered sandwiches and iced tea. While they waited, Luis leaned forward. "I want to hear everything," he said softly. "How have you been since we last saw each other?" Jasmine tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She thought of the small apartment she rented, the shifts at the diner, and the lonely evenings she spent watching old movies. She thought of her family back in her hometown and the life she had built here. "I moved here 3 years ago," she began. "I wanted a fresh start." She paused, remembering her first days in Cloverfield. The town was small, but it had been kind in its own quiet way. "I work at the diner. It's hard work, but I like it. I like serving people, making them smile." She met Luce's eyes. "But some days the scar on my face makes me feel different." Luis reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "You're different in the best way," he said. "You have a story that most people never face. You survived." Jasmine took a deep breath. She remembered the accident, the hospital bed, and the long months of physical therapy. She remembered the moment she first saw herself in the mirror and flinched at the sight. Over time, she had learned to see her scar not as a flaw, but as proof of her strength. Yet the memory of being mocked still stung. Their food arrived, and Jasmine took a bite of her turkey sandwich. The bread was soft, and the turkey was seasoned with a hint of sage. She closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the taste. Luis watched her with a gentle smile. "Tell me about your family," he said, between bites of his chicken salad. "Do they know you're here?" Jasmine's smile faded slightly. "My mom worries about me," she admitted. "She calls every day. She still lives in our hometown, and she worries about my safety and happiness." She looked down at her hands. She hates that scar. She thinks it makes me less beautiful. Luce's eyes softened. "Your mom loves you," he said. "She means well. But not all love sees the strength beneath the surface. You have to show her what you know." Jasmine nodded. She wanted her mother to see her as she saw herself, whole and capable. "I'll try," she promised. After they finished eating, Luis suggested a walk through the town square. The streets were lined with quaint shops and colorful banners. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers. Jasmine felt a sense of peace she had not felt in years. They stopped by the old fountain in the center of the square. The water tumbled softly, and pigeons cooed nearby. A few townspeople smiled at them as they passed. She waved back, noticing how different their reactions were now. Luis pointed to a small plaque on the fountain's base. It honored veterans from the town who had served in various conflicts. Jasmine read the names quietly, her heart swelling. With pride, she touched Luce's arm.
Ow!
"You're part of this history, too." He smiled. "And so are you," he said. They found a bench beneath a blooming magnolia tree and sat down. Luis took out a folded letter from his pocket, handed it to Jasmine. "I wrote this a few weeks ago," he said, "before I found you." Jasmine unfolded the letter carefully. Luce's neat handwriting filled the page. He had written about their time in service together, how her bravery had inspired him, and how he hoped one day to thank her properly. Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes as she read his words. "It's beautiful," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Thank you." Oh, Lewis took the letter back and folded it. He touched her scar lightly. "Your courage saved my life," he said again. "I owe you more than words can say." Jasmine set the letter on the bench beside her. She stared at the pale line on her cheek where his finger had been. For the first time, she felt truly proud of what it represented. They sat in silence, watching. The town's daily rhythm. A mother and child fed scraps to the pigeons. A mail carrier delivered letters to the post office. Everything felt simple and full of promise. As the sun climbed higher, Louis stood and offered Jasmine his hand. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." Curious, Jasmine took his hand. They walked a few blocks to a brick building with a small sign that read Cloverfield Veterans Support Group. The door was open, and a few men and women greeted them with nods. Luis led Jasmine inside. The meeting was just starting. A circle of folding chairs faced a small table with coffee and cookies. Jasmine felt nervous. She was not used to talking in front of strangers. Luis squeezed her hand. An older veteran with silver hair and a kind smile introduced himself as Captain Reynolds. He welcomed Luis back and then looked at Jasmine. "You must be Luce's friend," he said. "We're glad to meet you." Luis smiled proudly. "This is Jasmine Walker," he said. "She saved my life." A round of applause filled the room. Jasmine felt her face flush as strangers thanked her. Captain Reynolds gestured to an empty chair. "Join us," he said. Jasmine sat, still holding Luce's hand. The group shared stories of challenges, recovery, and resilience. Jasmine listened, hearing echoes of her own journey. When it was her turn, she hesitated. Then she spoke in a soft but steady voice. She talked about the accident, the scar, and the lonely days afterward. She spoke of the fear and the hope. As she spoke, the group listened with respect. No one laughed or made cruel jokes. Instead, they nodded and offered warm smiles. When she finished, Luis clapped the loudest. Others joined in. Jasmine felt tears sting her eyes once more, but these were tears of acceptance. After the meeting, people gathered around. A woman embraced her and said, "You're welcome here any time." A man patted her back and said, "Your courage inspires us." Jasmine looked around, her heart full. Outside, Luis wrapped his arm around Jasmine's shoulders. They walked back toward the diner, hand in hand. Jasmine felt different, now stronger, more certain. Her scar was still there, but it no longer felt like a mark of shame. It was a symbol of survival and solidarity. When they reached the diner, the regulars had paused their afternoon coffee to watch them return. Mr. Parker tipped his hat. "Glad to see you back," he said. Mrs. Dunlop offered a shy smile. Even Eddie gave a small nod of respect. Jasmine returned their gestures with a warm smile of her own. Shelley appeared at the door, wiping her hands on a towel. "How was lunch?" she asked. Jasmine grinned. It was perfect. Shelley winked at Luis. "Good to see you, Maureen." Luis laughed. "Good to see you too." Jasmine looked at the cafe across the street, at the Veterans Building, and at her friends and neighbors here. She realized she was no longer alone. She had found acceptance, respect, and friendship. She turned to Luis. "Thank you for today." Kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for being you." Jasmine felt a warmth spread through her chest. She looked at her scar in the reflection of the diner window. It was there, pale and jagged, but to her it looked beautiful, told a story of resilience, of compassion, and of unexpected reunions. As the afternoon sun shone down on the little town, Jasmine felt at peace. She had faced mockery and learned to stand tall. She had reunited with a friend who understood her pain and her courage. And she had found a new community that embraced her strengths. With a smile, she picked up a towel and stepped back inside the diner, ready for the rest of her day, stronger, braver, and more certain than ever before. Jasmine stepped back inside the diner, her heart light and her mind full of hope. The bell above the door chimed as she crossed the threshold. Shelley looked up from the counter and gave her a wink. Mr. Henderson, sitting in his usual booth, tipped his hat Even the group of teenagers who had been loud earlier gave her respectful nods. Jasmine paused and took a slow breath. The old diner felt different now, felt like home. Luis stayed close behind her. He watched Jasmine with a proud smile. She picked up a stack of menus and walked toward the empty tables. For the first time in a long while, she felt at ease. She placed menus in front of customers, smiling warmly. Each smile she gave felt real and strong. The scar on her cheek caught the light, but it no longer made her feel ashamed. Instead, it glowed like a medal of honor. A steady stream of afternoon. Customers arrived. Some came with friendly greetings. A young mother led her little boy to a booth, and the boy pointed at Jasmine's scar with curious eyes. Jasmine knelt beside him and touched his hand gently. She told him her scar was a sign she was brave. The boy nodded solemnly, as if he understood. He smiled, and so did his mother. Jasmine felt warmth spread through her chest. Luis took a seat. At the counter, he watched Jasmine work. She moved with calm confidence, carrying plates of sandwiches, salads, and coffee. When she moved, the diner's chatter softened into a gentle hum. She noticed the way people looked at her now, with respect and kindness. It felt like the world had shifted on its axis, and she stood at its center. Shelley brought over a bowl of homemade soup and set it before Jasmine. "You earned this," she said softly. Jasmine smiled and thanked her. She took the ladle and poured soup into herself. The hot steam brushed her face, tasted of vegetables and love. Jasmine closed her eyes for a moment, savoring each spoonful. She felt nourished not just in body, but in spirit. Luis leaned over the counter. "You're amazing," he said quietly. "I'm proud of you." Jasmine looked up at him, her eyes shining. She reached across and touched his hand. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. His hand covered hers, strong and steady. In that moment, Jasmine felt truly seen. The afternoon sun dipped lower, casting long shadows. Across the floor, Jasmine noticed a small group gathered near the window. Members of the veterans support group who had followed her from the cafe. They waved and smiled. One gave her a thumbs up. Jasmine's smile grew wider. She rose from behind the counter and walked over to them. They greeted her like a hero returning from battle. She thanked them and promised to visit the group again soon. At one table, Mrs. Dunlop and Mr. Parker sat with Eddie. They watched Jasmine approach. Mrs. Dunlop's eyes were gentle now, not mocking. She patted the seat beside her. Jasmine sat and poured them coffee. Mr. Parker cleared his throat. "Jasmine," he said, "I want to say thank you." Jasmine looked at him in surprise. "For your service," he continued. "For your bravery. We were wrong to ever make fun of you." Eddie nodded in agreement. Jasmine felt tears sting her eyes. She reached out and squeezed Mrs. Dunlop's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. The teenagers who had mocked her earlier stepped forward. Their leader, a tall boy named Marcus, looked at Jasmine shyly. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "We didn't know." Jasmine put her hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she said softly. "Now you do." The others nodded and offered polite smiles. Jasmine stood and hugged each of them. In their faces, she saw true regret and the promise of kindness. Luis stood and cleared his throat. "Everyone," he said, "I'd like to ask you something." The diner fell silent. Luis's voice was strong. "This scar shows survival." He said it shows that Jasmine faced something painful and came out stronger. Let's honor that spirit, not mock it. He raised his cup. "To Jasmine, the strongest person I know." The room filled with cheers and clinking cups. Jasmine covered her mouth in surprise. She felt her cheeks burn with happiness. As the diner quieted, Jasmine joined Luis at his booth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter he had given her earlier. "I want you to read this again," he said. Jasmine unfolded the paper. She read his words slowly, each line filled with his admiration. When she finished, she looked up at him. "Your words mean more than you know," she said. Luis smiled and folded the letter. "I meant every word," he replied. They sat in. Comfortable silence for a few moments, watching as the diner's afternoon rush died down. The soft glow of the setting sun painted the room in gold. Jasmine reached across the table and took Luce's hand. "Thank you for coming into my life," she said simply. Luis squeezed her fingers. "I'll always come for you," he promised. The door chimed again, and Jasmine's phone buzzed. She pulled it out and saw a message from her mother. It read, "Call me soon. I worry about you." Jasmine paused. Her heart skipped. She looked at Luis. He nodded encouragingly. Jasmine typed back, "I want to tell you about today. Can we video call?" She pressed send. Moments later, her phone rang. She answered with trembling fingers. "Jasmine," her mother's voice sang through the speaker. "Oh, my baby." Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes. "Mama," she whispered, "I have so much to tell you." Her mother listened as Jasmine told her about the reunion with Luis, the veterans group, and the respect she received at the diner. She spoke of the apology from her regulars and the kindness of the veterans. Each word felt like a step toward healing the distance between them. When Jasmine finished, her mother's voice was quiet with emotion. "I am so proud of you," she said. "Your scar is beautiful because it shows your strength." Jasmine pressed her hand to her heart. "Thank you, Mama," she replied. "I love you." They said goodbye, promising to talk again soon. Jasmine set the phone aside, her heart full. Luis watched the call end, stood and offered Jasmine his hand. "Let's close up," he said. Jasmine nodded and rose. Together, they moved behind the counter. Jasmine handed Shelley the apron. "Thanks for everything," she said softly. Shelley smiled and hugged her. "Anytime," she replied. Jasmine and Luis cleared the remaining dishes, washed the pots, and wiped the counters. The diner was quiet now, save for the hum of the refrigerator. Jasmine paused and looked around. She thought of the early morning rush, the taunts, the reunion, and the apologies. She thought of her mother's words and the support group's kindness. She smiled. Luis pulled her into a gentle embrace. "Ready to go?" he asked. Jasmine nodded and leaned into him. They walked out together, hand in hand. The sky was painted in pink and orange as the sun set. They paused on the sidewalk and looked up at the colors. Jasmine felt a peaceful joy fill her. She knew her life had changed. Forever. Luis wrapped his arm around Jasmine's shoulders. She rested her head against him. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last rays of sunlight. Jasmine traced the line of her scar with her finger. It no longer felt like a burden. It was a map of her journey, a journey of pain, courage, and now, respect. As the sky darkened, Luis kissed Jasmine's forehead. "Let's go home," he said. Jasmine smiled and nodded. They walked together down the quiet street, the diner behind them glowing softly in the twilight. Jasmine's steps felt light. She looked up at Luis and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." Luis squeezed her hand. "I always will," he replied. Hand in hand, they headed toward the next chapter of their lives. Jasmine knew challenges would come again, but she was no longer afraid. She carried the love of her mother, the respect of her town, and the support of a friend who understood her scars. Her story was not just about hurt, it was about survival, community, and the power of true recognition. And so, with the stars beginning to shine above them, Jasmine walked forward into the night brave, whole and ready for whatever would come next.